Okay, we are recording, so I'm going to let Tara kick us off.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our June digital meetup for Minnesota After Effects user group. Give me just 1 second and I will kick off our slideshow. That's right, I have the slideshow this time. It's very exciting. So welcome to June, in case you didn't know. It's still June. This week we're talking about Mogarts or motion graphics templates. But first, we're going to talk about what's new in After Effects. We'll then go into our quick tips. Paul will give the presentation on motion graphic templates, and then we'll open it up for show and tell and talk about what's coming down the line. So now it's everyone's favorite slide, bug fixes. And that's it. That's the slide in all its glory. But in other news, After Effects Beta version 18.4 has some new stuff happening. We've got multi-frame rendering improvements. We have an updated render queue. We have real-time draft 3D and ground plane improvements, which you might have recalled us mentioning that those were new things. And hey, they worked on them and made them a little bit better. And then in this image, we have also what's new is 3D bin icons in the beta version. Essentially, if you have 3D layers and layers that are in between them and they're like grouped as 3D objects, you'll see that like actual lined group with the 3D toggle. So that's a nice little visual indicator for you. And now we're going to go into quick tips, and the lovely Chad Gilmore will show us something.
So I know this is quick, so I'll try to burn through it here. This is the gist of what I'm doing here is creating like a delayed like blinky light that moves across. And the idea was not having to keyframe all these and offset them and all that, but where I can literally just keep duplicating layers and they just kind of keep popping over to the right. And then having some controls to be able to control the time and even like the offset. So that's the after. Let me show you the before here. So we can start over if we make a new layer, and stop me anytime anyone is confused or wants me to show something. I'm probably gonna move a little quick here, but I'm just gonna change the color here. And I like to use optical flares. And the way I'm doing this, I'm trying to start it all from the 0 point, the far left side. So I'm going to set my anchor to 0, which moves the anchor point to the left side. And then my position will be 0, which moves the solid all the way exactly to the left there. So, and then I'm going to move my optical flare. And I'm not going to get into the actual plugin itself. I assume everyone's pretty familiar with that. And I'm just going to set 3 keyframes, my brightness to 0. I'm going to move forward like 5 frames. I'll set the brightness to 200. And then another 5 frames and the brightness to 0. So all I've done here, pretty easy, and I didn't even set a keyframe. So how smart was that? So all we've done so far is put a solid on the left side of our screen, and we just have optical flares turning on and off, okay? So the next step I wanted to do was let's duplicate that, right? But I'm going to delete my brightness keyframes, and I'm going to, I'm gonna have to look at my notes here, so I'll have to deal with that. So my brightness is going to be using what's called like the value at time. That's this guy right here. So let's work through this together. So I'm going to say, I'll just say x equals, I'm just going to pick what to here, brightness. And then I'm just going to say, all right, value is x, right? So now I've got this other solid here. And all it's doing is just taking the brightness and copying this brightness. But I want it to be delayed. So what I'm going to do is say x, right? X equals this guy right here. Say x dot value. There's a handy little menu there at time. And I'm going to say it's going to look at the time. And we're going to subtract, for this example here, I'm just going to say 0.2, right? Or we'll say 0.5. Okay. So now this solid is off by a half second, right? So that's kind of that's basically how the entire, the crux of how the delay works. And to get our position offset, I'm going to look position, and I'm going to say x equals, let's see, this position, x equals this x position here. And I have buttons in my way here. X equals that position. I say y, same thing. And so now if I make a bracket here, this is kind of like my coordinates, like what you put your coordinates in. So if I say x comma y, it's saying this value, which equals this value, and this value, which equals this value, right? So now I've got this layer, and this is the position of this layer is replicating this, right? So wherever this goes, the other one goes. But what I want to do is say offset it. I want to offset my layer by, I'm touching my screen like you can see it. I want to offset this layer by the width of this, right? So I can say, we'll just say offset is our name of our variable here, equals x, which is this, the original solid width position, dot width of all things. And that value should equal the width of the comp. So if I say x plus offset, I have the wrong expression in there. All right, hold on one second. Now I got to remember what I did here.
X plus offset should be the name of a punk rock band.
Yes.
That would be fantastic.
Layer width. So I think that was one of the issues I was having was I don't know why, and Paul probably knows this better than I, but I feel like when I try to do math inside the array, it's not very happy. So I have to keep kind of like putting the math in other variables sometimes. Width. We'll call this one X. Right, and I still screwed it up.
I think it looks like you have x dot width instead of.
So if I do,
Yeah.
here, let's try this. Oh, you know why? Okay, all right. Sorry. The offset shouldn't be based off the position. It should be, that variable should be just the solid, right? So it's going to be the name of the solid. I'm not looking at anything else but the solid, and then I'm saying width. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to get rid of that. So offset plus x, and we're happy. Okay. So what I did there was I just said, hey, look at this layer, and then look at the width of that layer. What I was doing before was not that. So I'll just ignore I did that earlier bit. So then I'm saying, look at that layer's width plus that layer's x position, which right now is 0. So I can move this one, and this layer is always this plus the width. Like I can even change the width of this layer, and that one's always stuck to the side of it. Okay. So now the funky part where my goal was to not have to like keep copying and moving keyframes and things. I just wanted to be able to duplicate this layer and have it all just slide down for me. And that is accomplished via the index. So the index is this number right here. The layer index is literally just the number of the layer in your comp. So the index of my top layer is 1, this is 2, so on and so on. So I got to go through my notes here again too, so I apologize. So to offset our position based off our index, we say offset dot width times, do a little math in here. I'm just going to put index in parentheses, right? So now all I'm saying is offset the position, the x position of this comp by the width of this layer and multiply that by this number. But as you can see, the problem with that is it's always going to be off kind of by 1, right? So what you do to, it's an easy fix. You just say index -1. There we go. So now I can duplicate these and I can delete random ones. And I'm always going to have all my layers in here touching each other like that, right on the sides. And I'm basically, oh, sorry, was someone asking something?
No, sorry, that was me.
You're good. Keep going, Chad.
All right. So sorry, I'm blowing past 3 minutes here. So that's kind of the same principle I'm doing with the brightness. So we're going to say, I remember how I did all this now. It gets a little, this one gets a little funky. So we're going to say, I'm going to make a slider effect, and I'm just going to call this time delay, and we're going to say value of delay, and we're going to make a variable equals this number. I'm just going to make that number like 0.5. Yeah. And then we're going to say x, so this comp, sometimes, so we'll say x, this comp, value at time minus delay. So now I can control this delay with this slider. And that way, when I duplicate it, all I have to do is adjust this slider value and it'll affect all of them. The problem we have there, though, is they're all the same, right? So my first layer fires, and then all my other layers are delayed by the exact same value. So what I want to do here is to use the index again to kind of help multiply the time delay on every layer a little bit more than the last. So I'm going to make just another variable here. I'm going to call it extra delay. And that's going to be my delay slider, this guy, times my index. And I'm going to do -1, right? Because when you just do the index, it kind of shuffles everything over one more spot than it should. And then I'm going to make another slider here. This is going to be extra delay. Actually, I should just call this brightness, right delay. Okay. So we're value time delay times index. Sorry. Extra delay. -1 times, sorry, the slider here. And I'm going to stick that in its own little bracket. So we're looking at index -1 plus this plus this, right? So it's index -1 plus 0.5 plus 0.5. And then I'm going to say, sorry, hold on one second. Am I putting that all in the wrong spot? Am I totally just screwing this up on the fly here? Extra delay.
No pressure, Chad. We're all just watching you.
Yeah, sorry. The power outage really threw me. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So there's the extra delay expression that we just wrote that I put in the wrong spot. And I'm going to put this, so it's the delay, plus the index -1 plus the other delay, into looking at the flare here, value at time, minus all that. And now when we duplicate, so I realized I kind of just rambled through that and then stopped talking for a second, and it might have been confusing. But basically what this is looking at, and I can post this up for people to look at too and tear apart, is you're using the layer index, these numbers right here, to add more time delay to an already existing time delay that we have. So that way, as you duplicate this, it's pushing more layers further, it's pushing the position of layers down and adding more delay, if that makes sense. And then I'm using these sliders to basically kind of just control that amount. So I kind of just really blasted through that. So if anyone's got any questions, let me know. But that is the gist of it. So in the main project I did, there was a lot of other kind of things going on where I had some random stuff plugged into a few of these optical flare properties so that as you duplicated it, they all looked a little different. And there's a lot of things you can do like that, and even just, taking your main flare here and tying all of the optical flare properties to the one in here. You can get really complicated with all that stuff. So then as you duplicate it, and then I can just change this one spot and they all change together. So, and then you can send all those properties into Essential Graphics and put it all in a Mogart.
Great segue, Chad.
So, hey. So that's that.
Todd, did you have a question?
Yeah.
No, I was getting ready to applaud.
Ah, okay. Big round of applause to Chad for volunteering his time and being a quick tipper. We appreciate everyone. Chad can help out. So then up next, it's our own Paul talking about the Mogarts.
It's me. Yeah, Mogarts. It's one of those words that like you insert your vowel of choice. the Mogart, I like too.
Oh.
But lots of different options. So we chatted a little bit. Sounds like a couple people are kind of familiar with Mogarts and essential properties. Some people have never seen them before in their lives. So I'm going to try to hopefully get enough of both of those ends of the spectrum in here, but we'll see how it goes. If you've used them before, feel free to like chime in and interrupt me and tell me like, oh, hey, I do it this way. Or what about that thing? You should talk about that. Like, I'm not going to be offended if anybody interrupts my my beautifully crafted presentation. All right. And it says I'm presenting my screen.
I see Premiere Pro.
That is very good because that's what I'm using. If you saw like cat videos, I would be very concerned. So I'm going to start in Premiere just to kind of show you the primary use of Mogarts is to send customizable graphics out of After Effects and into Premiere for editing without rendering. And just to give you a sense of like what this might look like, I'm going to open up my Essential Graphics panel. And I came prepared kind of and got a few things in here. So this is looking in my libraries, which I've started using a little bit more, like mostly just for this. Like I don't really use Creative Cloud libraries for much else because I pretty much work only like this kind of thing only with myself. So I don't need to hand off to a bunch of people. But I have a title in here, and I'm going to go ahead and just drop that on my timeline. And I have this beautifully unrendered title that says "Hello World," and I mean that's it. I can shorten it and cut off the end, whatever, and it'll just keep on going. But it's cool, and if you've used like dynamically linked comps, you can do the same kind of thing. But what's nice about this is that if I select it, I have these other properties over here on the left that I can change this to say "Hello MNAE," and that it changes. Or I can change the text size. Or I can change, the width of this box on here. Maybe I want it really, really thin. But I left myself a note that says maybe I should match the font to make it look nice. So right around there looks fine. I can move it around, up and down, left and right. The world is your oyster, pretty much. Or you can make a really, if anybody's a designer, I'm sure this is going to be lovely. Green and purple, it's beautiful. Put it back to white, it's better. And even like control the tinting on here if I want to, make this maybe a little bit more blue in the midtones. I have no idea what this is going to look like. It's not bad. Or even the amount. I can go back to the original thing. This beautiful stock footage of the ocean. But what's cool and relatively recent in After Effects, I'm just going to undo a couple of those things, is that you can actually swap out stuff now too. So I have this background image. If I take my other footage here, because drop it on here, and this is still the same After Effects comp, but I can swap out footage. No rendering needed, really.
Game changer.
Right? It's
total game changer.
I don't know what I did. I feel like I flipped my color picker around somehow. Black should be on the bottom. I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, the ability to swap this out, like I recently used this too for some lower thirds, and I had like a little inset image that I could turn on or off, and it could drop different images in there instead of having to render out like 20 different things. Like just look at 20 different images. But it's super convenient to just be able to swap this stuff out. And it doesn't have to be full screen. It could be, one tiny asset. And the other cool thing here, which I'll show you later, is that in After Effects, this actually becomes a pre-comp when you use it that way. And so you could do some kind of fun things there. The other thing I wanted to show you is use for this is using for lower thirds. And so you can have this already in here. Going to play it pre-animated. Some dude makes some stuff.
Thank goodness I was muted because I just laughed out loud at that lower third.
Well, maybe I should make it more accurate. Say like, local guy thinks he knows things. There. So kind of fun to just be able to change this up, and like text-based stuff in Premiere Pro is primarily where I use this, and it's so great. The other nice thing about this is I have like an animated intro and outro, but 10 seconds is kind of long. And whereas my title, I just kind of shorten it and it gets shorter. Nothing changes. It just cuts off at the end. This is set up in a way where if I make this, oh, that's glitching out on me. Say I make it 4 seconds now. And now if I play it through, the intro is the same pacing, so is the outro, but it's shortened up that middle section without having to re-render anything. Or I can make it really long. I can make it a 20-second lower third and just stare at the lovely text and my sorely needed haircut up here. So that's another thing that's really kind of fun that I'll show you in a minute, and how to set that up. But this idea of like locking certain time regions, but like stretching it out or shrinking it, but keeping those locked regions like the same timing is kind of awesome. You're not like slowing everything down or speeding everything up. So that's why I bring stuff in here. The main thing to remember is that the Essential Graphics panel is where all this comes into Premiere, and it's also where you will edit these things by selecting them. So I'm going to flip over to After Effects, but I guess before I get too far, I can't see anyone, so I don't know if people are nodding or if they're like sleeping or.
You're getting nods and smiles. There's no questions.
No questions yet. All right.
Yet. I did notice the meta of you having your Hello World motion graphics on the computer for when you put on the lower third.
Oh yes, I came very prepared, and I'm just glad like there's no reflection of like some neighborhood kid like in the window over there.
You need to set it up, have it comped in, so when you change it, the lower third there, it changes on the screen too. Now that'd be.
I mean, I could like if I really wanted to, but then I couldn't, put a different image back here. However, that would have. Now I'm going to play with that and see if I can do that later. But this is the title setup, and I'll show you my finished one. And this is the Essential Graphics panel in After Effects, and it's in the window menu along with many other things. Sometimes I think a few of the default layouts, it's there automatically. If you're like me and you've customized your layout for so long you don't remember what the defaults look like, it's in the window menu. This first section is alphabetical, so it's in the E's. And here you have a list of all your comps in here. And I'm just going to take a look at the finished Premiere title. So this is what it looks like after we've got all the stuff put in here. I have a name I can put in here, or I just say title example, and that's what's going to show up in my libraries panel. You can make whatever you want. I have a couple buttons in here. The main ones, though, I'm going to flip back over to our undone one. And a couple buttons here that are really handy. And the first one is that the first thing to know is that not everything can go into the Essential Graphics panel. There are some things like custom values like gradient controls or like levels or curves that won't go in there at all. I think at first there were some like maybe 3D properties. There are a couple things that couldn't go in there. Now a lot of things can. But if you just want to see only the properties that you can add to here, there's this handy button that says Solo Selected Properties. And that's just going to open everything I could possibly add to this panel, which honestly is overkill, depending on, especially with shape layers, because pretty much any slider is going to be able to going in there. I'm so I don't often use this. I just let After Effects yell at me if I try to do something it doesn't want to do. But I have.
There's been 1 or 2 times where it's yelled at me,
Mhm.
and then I've tied that whatever that property was to like a slider.
Yeah.
And then
You
put
can
the
cheat.
slider in there, which is kind of weird that I have to do that, but
No, well, so there's one thing that I was going to show in a little bit, which I'll jump to soon. I'm just going to type it live example so I can keep track of what's going on here. Sometimes I like to do that too because these, flip back to Premiere, in our title, because that's got more stuff. Like these sliders, like this box stroke width, for example, goes from 1 to 50. And that's because I have a slider in here for stroke width. And I'll show that here. And if I drag that, all I like to do is drag stuff into a panel from the timeline. If you want it from here, you just have to right click on it and then add to Essential Graphics. You do need to have the comp open in here. It's kind of confusing because you can have a different comp open than what's in the Essential Graphics. Like if I go to like City Test, which I didn't know that comp was in here, and I try to add something to it, it's going to yell at me and say, just so you know, that's a completely different comp and it's not going to actually do anything when you put it in here. And it adds it anyway because that's what After Effects does. At least it highlights it in red to let you know that it's not going to work. Let's see. Where to prep Premiere Talent? So here you go. So if I drag the stroke width in here, it's going to be limited to whatever my slider is. So if I go in here, it's 0 to 50. You get that by editing the value, and you can adjust your minimum and maximum there. If I went in, I'm going to unhook that. So here's the stroke width. I'll just turn off that expression for now. Give it to 10. If I drag that in here now, it actually can go up to 32,768. So that's kind of a useless slider because all I can really do is like just this tiny little bit right here that maybe is useful. So that's another reason to get used to pick whipping and going to expression controls because it actually works much more flexibly than the default things do. But this is, how you do stuff. You just kind of start tossing things in here, like anything you think you might want to change, you can put up in there. So if I go back to my finished one, I have, my title text, which is just, I think if I double click on this, it will actually highlight it in the timeline, which is also super handy. So that's just the source text that I drag up there. And, hello world was what it was by default. By default that I typed in, and now I can change it in Premiere. So it's pretty easy to kind of get things in here. There's a couple other things you can do in here. Like I added this note. In this drop down in the bottom, there's a couple things that you can do. You can add a comment, which is what this is. So you can leave, if you're going to hand this off to somebody else, or if you're going to give it to an editor, or just even leave notes for yourself later on. This is a good place to do that. But the other nice thing is that you can add a group. And so what I did is I just added a group here and put all of my, just by dragging and dropping, you can put things in this little collapsible thing here. So maybe I know I'm not going to touch the background a lot, but sometimes it will. I can just kind of keep it out of the way. And now I have all these controls that only affect the background. And if you want this media replacement, it's the same thing. If I'll take this off here. All I do is just drag the whole layer in there, and then it gives you this. By default, it's the name of the layer or the name of the control, so I would change this to background. I can type. Now, I still spelled that wrong, but I don't care anymore. And then you can set it to default scaling, like, so this is 16 by 9, but maybe I have a 1x1 square image that I drop in there in Premiere. I can tell it what it's going to do. It can either, fill it where it's going to, I think, scale the whole thing, to fill the sides, scale to fit. I think we'll just like scale it until it hits the edges, like, and so you see the black bars. You can stretch it, or you can say don't do anything. And in Premiere, if I twirl this down, I actually do have some extra controls here. And what I don't like about them is that if I scrub them, I don't see the results live. And so I've gone through the trouble to add extra controls just because anything you scrub here will be live. But you can change this, like if I wanted this to maybe be a little bit bigger because I want to get on that guy a little bit, move it up. See, like I'm scrubbing it, but it doesn't really do anything right away. But you can, if it's video too, you can also adjust where the endpoint is. So maybe I want to get him a little bit further down, and now the beginning is 3 seconds and 21 frames into it. So you do have these really nice controls here to kind of play with it and customize it in Premiere without having to worry about rigging all that up if you don't want to. It's been pretty straightforward to kind of get the stuff all in here. Like I said, the only thing is that when you drag stuff in here, it does come in by the just the name of the property. Excuse me. And you have to rename it. I do, just like you want to name layers, you do want to name these things too. So if I go to source text, I don't want to call it source text. I would call it like title. And this isn't slider. It's box border or whatever I called it before. So it's pretty basic to get this stuff in here. The nice thing is that you can also use these inside of After Effects as well. Actually, I could show you the finished lower third too, because this will come in handy later. So I have this in here. I did the same thing. I, just put my text in there. I didn't put a lot of other controls because in this case I didn't want to do that, mostly because of time. But what I really wanted to show in this example was these little regions here. That look like comp markers, but they're blue. And I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can delete these. I just changed it to a comp marker. Delete all markers. There we go. So this is something that's kind of hidden away, and it's in the composition menu under a submenu called Responsive Design Time. And what this does is this will put markers in your comp that tells After Effects and Premiere if it's stretched in time, don't stretch this part. Leave that exactly as it is. So you can just tell it to create an intro, and I can tell it to create an outro. And Premiere Pro will only recognize these regions at the very ends. You can put them in the middle, but that only works in After Effects, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But now by putting these here and just dragging them to cover all of my keyframes, that's what allowed me in Premiere to stretch this really short. Like I cut the time in more than half, but my transitions weren't sped up at all. They were protected in time. And it's a super handy thing to have. And I'll show you in a minute that that does work inside of After Effects too. And so you might want to file that away because it's going to come in handy. You can also, if you wanted to, just make a marker. Just hit the asterisk key on the numpad, and I can hold on Option or Alt and spread this out. And I can just go down here and say, make this a protective region. And now Premiere would ignore this, but After Effects would now treat this the same kind of way. So I'll show you that in a little bit. But let's talk about essential properties in how they work in After Effects itself. So this is a little face rig for a project that unfortunately I couldn't finish up, but it's got a few controls in here that I've already added to essential properties. I can control like the size of the eyes, how big the pupils are, how close or far away the eyes are. It looks like I want to make this longer because it got capped somehow. And that's how you can edit the range here, and that's what will show up in After Effects. I can look around, do all this fun stuff, right? Things that we've done with rigs before, but instead of the controls being in the effect panel, they're in here. And what makes that really cool is I added this to a couple comps over here, and this is just untouched. If I twirl open my pre-comp, I now have this essential properties thing in here, because Adobe likes to put everything in the timeline under twirly menus. If you don't like it, I really wish I had something to tell you. There's nothing you can do. Everything's just under twirls. But now in here, if I wanted to, I can actually go through and maybe I want to make this one, it's kind of a box. I'm going to move its eyes out here for their part. I think I'm going to, keyframe a couple blinks. That's off. I'll do, and more blinks really quick. I'm going to change the expression here from a big smile to an open smile. And my super animating skills, you know, we got some blinks and an open smile. Now I also have character B here. And you notice none of that carries over here. It's all its own thing with its own controls. So now if I want to change, it's like this yellow and orange isn't really working for me. Maybe I want a blue, it just had a blue popsicle, I don't know, or its lips are cold. And now it's got a different color. I can make these pupils, you know, really tiny, and maybe the eye is even tiny too. I have a random seed here just to adjust like some wiggles on the eyes to make it either goofy or scary. I'm not entirely sure which. But the nice thing now is like that doesn't affect the other comp. So it's a really great way to have one single rig that then reflects everywhere. And if I go back into my thing here, maybe I realize that my mouths are generally too close to the eyes. So I'm going to shift that down. And now that updates in all of my uses of that pre-comp. So it's a super handy way to just make a bunch of variations of things without having to make a lot of copies of those same things. And as I was changing these, I'm not sure if you saw, there's these little buttons that changed to white. This means that I changed something from the default. And there's a couple options I have here. I can either pull the value from the original pre-comp, so I can do that. Now my eyes are the same size. My pupils went back to the default. My look went here. When there's these buttons up here that will just do everything. It's gonna, or it should. Now it's not because it's a demo and After Effects doesn't want me to look good. That should do everything. Or the other option is that I can push a value back into the main comp, and then that will reflect everywhere. So maybe I really do like this mouth color. I'm going to change. I know my other character is blue, so I'm not going to do that. Let's do a purple. Really, colors are my thing. I'm really, really good with colors. I don't know if you know that. So I really decided I like that purple, and actually I want those lips everywhere. So I can now push this to the primary comp, and now I go back here, and now anywhere that would be used that it hasn't been changed, it will go to purple. Like I'll show you how that works if it is changed. Like maybe I make black lips here, and now I'm going to make this, you know, green here. But now if I push this back, my character here, because I changed it, it's not going to change. So you don't have to worry about like, oh, I don't want to undo all my work. It's only going to do the default values. And it's a really kind of fun way to play around with different options without, you know, feeling like you're going to blow away all your work. So that's essential properties in here. Oh, I did want to show you quick, before I move on to responsive time and ask questions, what media replacement within After Effects itself looks like. So I'm just going to make a new main comp. I'm going to drop my title in here. And there's two things I actually want to show you. One is how media replacement works. The other is how text does not work as well in After Effects as it does in Premiere. So because After Effects has to fit everything in this tiny little property row here, if you're lucky, you can see what this is. I just know that it's a video of something. So now I'm going to go through and grab my same guy from before, and you just drop it on here, and it works the same way. But what's cool is you get this extra folder that's created, and now this is the background Adobe stock. So what happened is they actually dumps it in a pre-comp that's the size of your original footage. This is maybe a poor example because these are both exactly the same size. Actually, I take that back. I think this is a little bit different. This is 2048 wide. But now my pre-comp is 1920. So if I really wanted to get in here and, you know, move it over so I got the left edge, I'll change the color so we can actually see the edge here. I can actually move that over. And now that's what's going to be used in here. So you can do a lot more work to this. Like if I know that it's actually kind of bright, I'm going to apply a curves to this. Just kind of drop those midtones down a little bit, maybe cap those highlights. And now that, takes the colors from the tritone much better than I think it did before. So it's really kind of fun to play with this. It works the same with still images, and it's kind of handy to just replace footage and other things in there, while again, still having your one main source of truth that controls everything else. So that's how media replacement works.
Main source of truth, also a good punk rock band name.
So Tara, I'm going to be very disappointed if you do not start a punk rock band. All these names that are coming up here. So I promise I'll get to responsive design in time because it does cool things. But really quick, text in After Effects, it's not great to work with for essential properties. So I can go to edit my value, and all I really get is this. So I can type in, like, hello, Tara. And it'll work, it'll replace it. But you notice I don't have those controls for like the font size that I can go through here, and where was my title? Like I don't get the slider here to change what that is. So you're a little limited in how text works in here, but it's still available if you do need to use it. But like I said, most of my text work is in Premiere Pro then, and I don't really worry about it. And the one thing I realized I forgot to show you too is in here, when you add text, you get this little edit properties thing. And here's where you can choose what you want to enable for your editor. So if you know that you don't want them to ever touch the font size, all you have to do is just make sure that this is not checked. But you can also do things like enable custom font selection. And then you can let them pick Comic Sans or Papyrus or Comic Papyrus, which is a real font, if they really, really wanted to. And it's nice that they give you this control though. So I can say like, actually, you know what, I don't ever want anybody to touch my font size because I spent a lot of time on this. And it's also bedtime in my house and it's not going well, if you can hear that, I'm not sure. There's one more thing I was gonna say about text, but now I don't remember what it was. When you are all done and you're going to go to export this for Premiere, this is where you also handle that. And got this button here, project needs to be saved. It's going to save it, reopen everything back up, and then bring up this window to kind of let you name it. Everything down here is going to be libraries panel groups, and then you can also save it to a local drive if you want to, and send that file to somebody else who's not on a shared Creative Cloud library, or that maybe you just want to keep it somewhere else. But you have that choice of where to put it. The nice thing here is that you have these checkboxes that it's going to warn you if the templates are using fonts that aren't in Adobe fonts. Because what will happen is, say I save this out, this uses, I think, Mr. Eves Modern as a font, and I give that file to my editor who doesn't have that font installed, because it's Adobe font, it will just automatically grab that font. I think it pops up a warning and it just grabs that font, and that just works, which is super handy. If I used a really expensive font that I bought from somewhere else, like Type Foundry or Hefler or something like that, it'll throw me a warning and say, hey, just so you know, like, you're going to have to give the font to this person too. It's not going to work. It'll just go back to whatever the default is. So you have these options to kind of warn you. Most things will actually work just fine without having After Effects installed too. But there are a couple things like certain effects, or I can't remember if media replacement requires it. Some things will actually require After Effects to be installed as a separately on the computer. Most people, I feel like, will have Premiere and After Effects installed, but sometimes, if all you use is Premiere and Photoshop, why install everything else? And the last thing is warn me if there are text controls that cannot be edited with a Premiere Pro type tool, and that's if you're adding. I don't remember which ones do it. I might have to look in documentation for that, but there are a couple things that like the text tool won't touch in there, and it might have to do with the fallback, but don't quote me on that. So that's also how you get it in there. And then when you're in Premiere, I showed you, you can browse. This just shows up here. If you are looking at local templates folders, well, these are actually a lot of ones that I've done before. So these are all locally, and there you can just like click on the plus button. You can browse to find the actual Mogart file and import it that way. And it makes a copy of it. And it's it's kind of nice because I like knowing where my files are, but it's also like some extra steps compared to just using Creative Cloud libraries, which it just shows up magically, which is kind of nice when it actually works. So I realized I kind of went over the exporting and importing kind of quick, but this is the kind of thing that is pretty well documented on Adobe's help to walk you through that process. What's not always well documented is this responsive design time, which I will show you now. So I have my beautiful, what do we always do when we make pre-comp or make animation demos? We do a ball bounce. So I have my beautifully timed ball bounce that's sitting here. It kind of settles. Now it's going to try a jump. Doesn't work. But now, screw you guys, it's going to fly away. So I have this really nice, I'm going to put it in my, I'm going to pre-comp it because it's a part of a scene. But before I do, I'm going to add these responsive design time areas. So I'm going to make my markers, protect region, do the same. You can actually do it if you hold on Option and hit the asterisk key, it brings this up right away. And I can just do protect it. And I think I'll just make it, 2 seconds, and then I can shrink it to where I need it. A million ways to do everything. What I don't like about this is that I have to guess off the bat right away, but I can always change it around. So now I told After Effects, don't mess with these keyframes ever when I'm playing around with time. So if I go into here and I drop in, and this isn't directly related to Essential Properties, but it kind of is because it's with Premiere. What I like about this now is it actually shows me where those regions are. Whereas Premiere, if you remember, it didn't. You could just shrink it and you have to kind of know roughly where those things are. But what's nice here is that if I want to now time stretch this, and it's important this is time stretching, not time remapping. Time remapping with keyframes for your time code does not work with this. So if you've never used this before, there's this extra set of columns, in, out, duration, and stretch, with these little brackets down here. I can't remember if there's a keyboard shortcut to actually show these or not. But now what I can do is if you see, I can shrink this, and those protected regions are staying. And if I go too far, you see it will start shrinking them to keep a little bit of space. But I'm just going to put this here, and now my animation, it had really doesn't have those pauses anymore. And I can shrink it, I can stretch it. Maybe I have my VO shifted and I need these gaps to be a little bit longer. Can play with that there. So like I said, you got to keep in mind it's only time stretch, time remapping. I can't remember if it throws an error. Like this, I think it doesn't care. It says, I don't know what you're talking about, Paul. I'm just going to remap your time because that's what I do. Yeah, so time remapping will it either messes with things, or I guess time remapping doesn't work. Either way, it's incompatible. Don't even bother trying. And that is responsive design time. Again, like Chad, I feel like I went over things very fast. So before I stop sharing my screen, I'm just wondering if anybody has a question to shout out at me, or something that they've run into Essential Properties that we can take a look at quick. Otherwise, I'll stop sharing and we can move on with our evening.
Don't everyone unmute your microphones at once.
I was going to say stunned silence. Either I got disconnected and I've been talking to no one for the last 20 minutes. Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing then, so I can actually see a few faces again. But yeah, that's Essential Properties, and it's super handy. Biggest areas I use it are like any kind of rig work that I have to repeat in a bunch of places, and lower thirds and on-screen graphics like text in Premiere. I never render anymore, and it's so nice. Where I used to have like 75 files to manage and update and keep track of. Now I just type in Premiere and it's fine. It's done.
Beautiful.
There's still holdouts you work with though that insist on rendering out 75.
I mean,
I've worked with the guy that did them. Like, all right, glad I made all these expressions in this massive Mogart system. Find my After Effects project and render it all out.
Yeah, I mean, there are benefits. Like there are things you could do in After Effects, like use like CSV files or JSON files, and like duplicate a comp, and then have it automatically read your Excel sheet of lower thirds and just spit that out. So there's benefits to doing it that way too. But if the design is not really going to change anymore, and you just have a lot of text to get in there, just make a Mogart, type in Premiere, copy paste. It's, to me, it's way easier at least. So.
Right on.
Right.
Thanks for sharing, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Nice job.
Yeah, really good job.
Thanks.
You got a lot of leaned heads for the responsive time, just so you're aware.
Oh,
So-
yeah, the responsive time was fantastic.
Yeah, it's another one of those features. Like I feel like they keep sneaking in these really useful things, but not really spending a lot of time talking about it because it's
Right.
it's hard to talk about in a soundbite or a tweet. But they can really come in handy. So like responsive design time. I don't like the name. I think it's overly complicated. I don't know why there's a hyphen in there either. But it's nice when you have you have these pauses and you can just stretch it and shrink it and adjust those pauses as you need to without selecting and moving just a ton of keyframes.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, if there's nothing else about Paul's very excellent Mogart demo, then the next item on the agenda is show and tell. Does anybody have anything that they want to throw to the group for questions, or you have anything excited that you worked on that you just want to share with someone who can appreciate it for all its glory? Like, feel free to unmute and chime in, guys. Or we can just look at each other's faces and enjoy the fact that we all appreciate this beautiful, robust software. That's cool too.
I think we're okay to move on then, I guess.
All right. So then our last item is meetup announcements. We are not having a meetup in July. Paul and I are going to take a little mini break, but our next meetup is for tentatively Thursday, August 19th, and it will be discussing Premiere Pro. However, we were talking about potentially doing another coffee and keyframes in July, just so we're not completely abandoning you guys with your After Effects needs. If we do another coffee and keyframes, I'll probably be doing that on a Saturday morning. And we will make sure to update you guys via Facebook and Discord. Otherwise, yes, next meeting, August on Premiere Pro.
Great.
Thank
you.
That's all we got. That's it.
Thanks, guys.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming out.
All right. Thank everybody. Bye.
See ya.
See ya.